Welcome back, everyone, to the Layman's Law School, where three gentlemen lawyers sit around and discuss the legal issues of today and try to explain it in terms in which everyday Americans can understand and comprehend. And today we're discussing something that's been in the news that people have been following pretty closely. I know I have. It's a tragic event.
You're always in so much of a hurry to get into the topic at hand.
I mean,
I'm a little. I feel like
go ahead, torture me.
I'm offended by it, and
we've worked hard all week, Shawn.
Yeah,
some of us have routinely been here for podcasts.
Yes.
You've taken a number of times off sabbatical, and we look forward to this on Friday.
One of my favorite things on Friday is to see your face.
Wonderful.
After
cheers to a good week.
To a good week, gentlemen.
Love you too.
You remember now? You're back. You got it. You're feeling good. Feeling fresh.
Feeling fresh.
Now we can proceed. What are we talking about?
What we got? But we also have some news.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to change up the actual format a little bit. We've, Pablo Picasso said, good artists imitate, the best artists steal. And we've watched another podcast that actually has a format. It's called Smartless. It has Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, Will Arnett, and two of the guys don't have any idea what the topic is. And so I'm the one today presenting the topic, and these two guys are going to weigh in with their considerable knowledge and expertise to try and ask some good questions, and hopefully I can be of service and answer.
And to, I guess, the delight of our listeners and viewers, me and Shawn get to bring topics that
that's right.
Who knows what could happen.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to trade. We're going to trade off.
Yeah,
we're going to try and make it seem legal.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's going to be legal related. Layman's Law School.
All right. Well, today we do kind of have a sad topic, but we're going to talk about some of the ways in which the families might be able to seek some sort of justice and hopefully make this whole type of endeavor safer for everybody in the future. So, Oceangate Expedition, yes, and the Titan, the submersible.
First question I already have is: are we supposed to call it Oceangate Gate? Well, because every kind of controversy, they put a gate on the end. So this already has gate on it.
Yeah.
So do we say Oceangate Gate?
Yeah, Oceangate Gate.
Its mere name denotes scandal from the get-go.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, in this, Oceangate is a company that leads expeditions down to the Titanic, and it takes people for $250,000 a piece down, 13,000 feet to basically view the Titanic. And they do this 400 plus miles off the coast of the United States. I think they leave from Canada. And Oceangate is an American company. Oceangate Expeditions is and this is important, which actually runs the tours, is a subsidiary. And it is formed under the laws of the Bahamas. So that's
course.
Yes. So we'll explain why that's important a little bit later. But what happened, unfortunately, is that 5 tourists and the CEO went down in a submersible, and they lost comms within about 2 hours of the start of the trip down to the 13,000 feet. And what ensued after that was the U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Navy, Canadian Coast Guard, among other people, private actors, all started to try and do a search and rescue. And unfortunately, they didn't begin this until they were scheduled to come back up. And so even though they lost comms, it wasn't unusual for them to have some sort of technical issue, apparently. And so they waited until they were...
that's reassuring.
Yeah. That is among many other things. But what I want to talk about in this particular case, all right, these guys signed up for this tour. They knew they were going down to these depths. And in the process of doing this, they basically have to sign a waiver. Many people out there that engage in just about everything, zip lines, they go on a kayaking tour, any sort of recreational activity that has any danger whatsoever.
Sometimes your neighbor's trampoline.
Exactly. They have to sign what they call a liability waiver. And we wanted to cover today a little bit about liability waivers, and in particular the one that's involved in this particular case and how it may affect the potential claims that may arise. There's some other issues about admiralty law. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but let's stay with the waiver. In this particular waiver, it's a 3-page document. Okay, the word death and serious injury is said multiple times within that document.
Well, it's 3 pages. You got to at least say it 3 times. It's got to be on every page.
And included in this document is basically an explanation that this vessel that they're going in is an experimental vessel and has no certifications as being, sort of tested or worthy of this particular type of descent.
So you signed up to be a lab rat. Essentially.
And so people have been weighing in on whether or not this, waiver is going to be effective in this particular case. And as many cases, when you're dealing with the law, the question is, it's always going to be, it depends.
Sure.
And not knowing what type of law is going to apply, I thought we would try and maybe just apply Georgia law to this particular waiver. I'll just tell you this waiver is in 12-point font. All of it is in 12-point font. Okay, there are no areas that are bolded. There are no areas that are in different colors, aside from the logo at the top.
Sure.
Nothing is underlined. Nothing is in italicized, bold or italicized. Right. So all those things become important when you're looking at a waiver. Yeah. So, generally, Reid, can you just tell the guests, when they are engaging in something like a sport, they're going to a sporting event, and they're asked to sign some sort of liability waiver, how effective is that waiver?
Well, I get questions on waivers and I sign waivers haphazardly. I just sign them. I don't care because waivers mean nothing to me. They really do. I mean, they just are garbage language in my opinion. Now, granted, there's some that hold a little weight, but in my legal opinion, there's not many that do. There's lots of reasons for that. Number one, there are certain things that you can't waiver away. You can't waiver away certain rights. You just can't. Even if you sign it, they go, well, you can't. The court's public policy says that you can't do it. And then secondly, if you have something that I'm participating in, I have the assumption of the risk. I already know the dangers, right? So to sue somebody in that kind of realm and to be successful, they're going to have pretty gross negligence because you know that you're in a dangerous activity, whether it be whitewater rafting, zip lining, all the stuff, examples that you laid out. So the waiver can protect against general negligence, but it doesn't protect against gross negligence. So that's what I mean is I already kind of know the dangers of what I'm doing. But if the company is doing things correctly and things fail, then I know I can't recover. That's part of the risk. But if I sign a waiver and they're doing things incorrectly and it fails, I can still sue them because that can be gross negligence. It's going higher than the normal negligence.
And that's how I always think about it too, in assumption of the risk cases is, do we have an actor involved with the company or whatever that made it less safe? You talked about whitewater rafting. We know that you could be thrown out of a whitewater raft. We know that you could go under, be lodged under a rock, and drown. It just happens. And you might not be able to recover at all for that type of incident.
Well, it's just like surgery, not to cut you off, but in each surgery, you can die. You can die. I mean, that doesn't mean something was done inappropriate. It's just that's part of the risk.
Sure.
But go back to your whitewater.
But if the tour guide who's operating this vessel that we're all on is high on cocaine and drunk and shows up to work and takes us, and then he thinks it's funny and he pushes me out of the boat in a situation, that's a different story. No matter what I signed and waived, there's going to be a matter. No, this guy was grossly negligent. He was acting on behalf of your company, was grossly negligent. You can't waive that away.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to talk about. When we talk about gross negligence, when we say that word, it's something that's very common to us because it's two words that stand for a very complex concept that we could talk about for a long time, but it basically stands for a higher degree of fault in a particular case. And whether or not something is gross negligence is left to the enlightened conscience of the jury. So they look at what happened and they decide whether the person was grossly negligent. So is it grossly negligent to have 2 beers and be a whitewater rafter and just not be able to lift the person in? Or is it grossly negligent to have 10 beers and not be able to lift the person or to push the person out? Those things have to be decided by a jury, and sometimes that's why we have to actually have the the trial. But so, having said that,
one more thing before you go on to the next one. You asked my opinion on waivers and that kind of thing. I think the main reason for waivers is a deterrent for people to not bring a claim.
That's right.
And it does more to limit that by just pure fear or people not being educated and saying, "Oh, I signed a waiver," or "They signed a waiver, so we don't have a claim anyway." That it does more good for the company in that regard than it actually does legally.
Yeah, and it eliminates a lot of minor claims that could have come up because it just might not be worth the legal costs that would be incurred in actually having to prove that the waiver was not in line with the law, ineffective. So in this particular case, they're going to have to decide whether or not, a jury may have to decide whether or not this company, Oceangate, was, grossly negligent in this particular situation. And so to understand, I'm going to give you all some more facts here and see whether or not we can maybe overcome this. So in 2018, the actual director of Oceangate Expeditions, he was the safety director of these expeditions, raised a lot of concerns about the actual vessel that they had constructed, and basically said that they were having too many malfunctions because this had been down to those depths a number of times already. And for those people not familiar with these types of trips, as the vessel goes down and is compressed and comes back up and expands a little bit, these things can cause fatigue of even these very strong vessels that they have built. And he was expressing these concerns and was summarily fired for it. In addition to this, and it resulted, he then published a paper after that talking about, in the community, talking about his concerns, and raised a lot of concerns from other members. This is in 2018. And then he was sued by Oceangate for that. And he, in turn, filed a lawsuit, counterclaim for basically retaliatory, his retaliatory firing.
Sure.
And it was settled out of court. That settlement was sealed. Now, in addition to that, in 2001, this is a small community, but let me see if I can find the name of it. There's an international community of the Maritime Technology Society. As an industry group, they sent a letter collectively, that had basically 30 some odd engineers and people that work in this area, explaining that Oceangate, they sent this to the CEO and founder of Oceangate, that they were concerned about the experimental nature of the actual vessel itself and the way it was constructed, that their countermeasures were and their safety measures were not adequate, their training was not adequate. They were buying off-the-shelf equipment like strip lighting, just like online.
Amazon.
Exactly. They were running the actual propulsion systems using a Xbox controller.
I think it was Logitech, which makes it even worse. Worse.
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry, Logitech is one of our sponsors.
Yeah, and in addition, he broke one of the cardinal rules for building an actual vessel and the materials that he used. So he used a composite of titanium and carbon fiber, and these are both renowned for their actual strength, but also their brittleness. The harder an object is, the more brittle it actually becomes. So once it's compromised, it becomes very, very brittle. In addition to that is when you have these two types of materials and you mix them, steel, titanium, carbon fiber, which were all components of this from the screws down to the cap, when you mix those and you put them in what they call an electrolyte, and that's basically what salt water is.
Sure.
It can cause a positive and negative charge and cause a current to pass through the entire hull. And what that causes is galvanized, corrosion, right? And it causes it at an accelerated rate. As everybody knows, if you're going to put salt water on something, it's going to eventually rust on steel, right? But when you have a composite material like this, the materials are not going to bond together well, and that corrosion is going to be, is going to happen more frequently. And he has acknowledged in other sort of documentaries and been on TV basically saying that he broke rules in creating this capsule. And he thinks he did it with good logic and engineering.
I did hear a quote of his that said, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was said something to the effect of, nobody remembers the people who don't break the rules or something to that effect. And I'm just, that's rough.
That's my opening statement right there. We're gonna start out things with a nice video presentation quote from the CEO
of Oceangate.
Right. And when he was pressed by these people to actually get certification from some sort of regulatory body to actually test this thing at depth. And
that's why it's called a submersible instead of a submarine, because it's a submersible does not have to go through the tests and be checked off, but a submarine does. So
I was not aware of that.
That's why it's the Titan submersible.
Ask one question? Sure. Was there an employee of this company on the vessel with them, or did they just go down alone?
The CEO.
The CEO was actually on the vessel.
On the vessel and died in it.
It's essentially a case of
he assumed the risk himself. He felt strongly in his stuff.
Well, to me, it reeks of just the ego of a very, very rich person.
Yeah.
Where they just go, nothing terrible is going to happen to me, and I can build a rocket ship.
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Well, what James Cameron noted was that he noted that sort of an older sort of adage where he talked about it, if history is not heeded, it will repeat itself. And what's interesting is that we had the captain of the Titanic, who was on an experimental first voyage, was warned about ice, was told ice was, he was going into an ice field, that he needed to slow down, that he needed to watch out for it, and he ignored all warnings, went full steam ahead, and sank. And now here we have a guy that is, starting a new business, is breaking all the rules, is being warned that the way he's doing things is not the right way to do things, that it's dangerous, that there needs to be some oversight of what he's doing, and he's going full steam ahead with the same exact results, and he is 400 feet, his body is now 400 feet off the bow of the Titanic.
It just reminds me of like the laws and these regulations. It's the same thing for like speed limits. You think about it sometimes and you go, I can go faster than 70 and be fine. And that's true. But it's like I tell my kids all the time, they do stuff and they go, well, I didn't get hurt. I'm like, not on that time. But if you keep doing it, and that's why these regulations are there, it's gone down before and it's fine. But if you keep doing it, something bad's going to happen. If you keep breaking the rule or keep breaking the law, sooner or later, you're going to wind up dead.
Well, and in that process, I consider that a scientific endeavor.
Sure.
And we've all learned the scientific process. And it usually, doesn't involve live humans as lab rats over repeated trials of this experimental submersible vehicle.
Sure.
To ocean depths of that far.
Right.
That's just my knowledge of the scientific method.
Well, what do you think, Shawn? What is your opinion on the waiver situation? Do you think waiver is going to hold water?
Well, let's talk about some of the requirements and look about for Georgia law. So first of all, it must be in writing. We got that.
Sure.
Check. Okay.
Well, and you mentioned you gave a big hint already, but the bold and the different colors is. There's a lot of litigation I remember from law school on that. I don't remember specifically.
But here comes the next things. It must be in writing. It must use clear and unambiguous language. Okay, so now there has been a lot of litigation about what is clear and what is unambiguous language when it comes to waiving particular rights.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that the Georgia law looks to is whether or not something calls the reader's attention to the fact that they are giving up a right and what that actual risk is, what risk they're incurring actually is. I mean, if
they have the full weight of what they're doing.
Well, and that's why we see on any of these, warning stickers that are on our cars or on our lawnmowers or on our manuals of products when we get them, they all say failure to follow these rules may result in death or serious bodily injury. Right. I mean, in big, bold, so that they can check that box and say.
It's usually it's highlighted some way. It's in a bigger font. It's something to draw your eye to it.
Well, knowing that they've mentioned the fact that this is an experimental vehicle, this doesn't have any sort of regulations, that has been certified by anybody, that and that they are knowingly going on this thing, risking death. It's in writing. You have to be, of course, you have a voluntary signature of a competent adult. And in this case, I think the youngest person on there was 19. So, the age and the competency of the individuals weighs in. But, under these circumstances, the Georgia law will look at whether or not they bolded a particular area, waiver of liability, whether that's a larger font than others. If it's a hidden font, so if it's, everything else, like all the benefits, of joining some sort of thing or going on some trip are all in 50-point font, and then you get, something in 10-point font right at the bottom that says you're waiving all liability and I can have all your stuff when you die, and, the court's going to look at that as to whether or not it's cleared.
Sure. Yeah. And you also have the position of the people, which in this case is not really, but just for the people at home. Well, if you need a car and the only place you can get a car is there's only one car dealership in the entire place that you live, or whatever the issue is, then they have a bargaining power over you, and so they look at it. But this one, I don't think that really comes into play just because these people are signing up for it. But what does come into play is when you're talking about getting around waivers and that kind of thing is the type of activity, number one, and then the type of person and what they are saying they are. And in this situation, you have all this saying it's experimental, but then on the other side of it, you have the CEO going, he's laughing it off. Y'all are fine with me, no problem. This thing's awesome. I've already done it. So you're making assurances to people to go, oh, this waiver's no problem. There was a clip when they were, searching for him that came out that the guy was just going, oh, that he's laughing and signing the waiver, and they're encouraging him to do that. So they're really, if you hold yourself out to be an expert, or if you hold yourself out to have said, this thing, it's experimental, but it's awesome.
It's based on science.
It's awesome, and I did everything. And that turns out to not be true. Well, then that waiver's no good. You have plenty of arguments in this case that I don't think the waiver is even a problem to get around if you're suing for wrongful death.
Sure, and we had recently on Law Call, I had the opportunity to host a very interesting guy who did like termite damage law.
Oh, that's strange. Yeah,
and he said that the way that they pursue, these cases is through contract law, through fraud, things like that. It just opened up my eyes to a number of ways, just like in this case. They might say, a court might say, well, this contract is, or this liability waiver is totally valid.
Sure.
But if, the people were not supplied with the information that they should have been supplied with, or if they actively held out that this was a safe vessel, even though it was experimental, that makes a difference in things. Even if you signed a waiver that was completely valid under law, even you induce somebody to sign it based on not giving them the information or reassuring them with information that wasn't true.
That what you and Chace were talking about with the different types of metal and rust. Did you tell that to them? Did you tell I made it out of this material that is known to have problems? I mean, if you didn't put that in the waiver,
or how many times it's been down? Many, propane tank has been down in the water.
Mini propane.
Yeah, and they talk about too. I mean, he has been recorded multiple times on video explaining that he worked with NASA and the University of Washington in order to develop this particular carbon fiber technology, where he makes this carbon fiber and titanium to build this vessel. And so those are, reassurances and
100%.
Right. And that was actually noted in the letter sent by industry experts, basically saying that their advertising is misleading the public about the safety of this particular vessel, because we don't know what the safety of the vessel is. He's reassuring people that it is safe. No one's tested it. No one knows, what it can withstand and take. And so that was part of it. And then actually after the letter, they had to they changed and took down some of their advertising and the way in which they put it out there. But that information is still, once it goes on the internet, it's out there.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And if you got somebody that wants to go on this trip and they're looking for good information or bad information, if they really want to reinforce their desire to go on it, they're going to find the information that supports their desire. And so, like you said, I think that under the circumstances, this may be a little bit of Vic Hawk law. where
it don't smell right.
Right, it don't smell right kind of thing. And you'll find this out, that built into the court system is a lot of discretion. And the courts actually, the law can be very rigid, but they can actually have discretion to sort of oversee certain aspects of a case. And when there's a legal case that's based just on the law, okay, and it weighs heavily in favor of public policy and keeping people safe,
right,
courts will exercise discretion in ways that will eliminate any sort of waiver like this.
And that's a huge point. I'm glad I meant to mention that earlier, but it's when you have a waiver, that's a huge get out of the waiver clause is how does it affect public policy? Now, if it's, riding a Segway or something, it might not be that big a deal, but when you're talking about going to the depths of the ocean floor or going to space, that has a lot of public policy problems there. So they're going to weigh on the side of letting a jury or finder of fact decide this versus saying, nope, signed a waiver. I just don't think there's any way possible, at least under Georgia law and even just United States federal law, that this kind of waiver would hold any kind of water. But, you're going to have problems with what laws are going to be used. I mean, you got different countries, different entities, all kind of problems.
Right. And this area of the law is governed by maritime and admiralty law. That's going to weigh in heavily in sort of any action that arises from this.
Which is a whole different animal.
But what does that even mean? You said they're 400 miles off the coast, right? So they're in
international waters.
In no one's waters.
That's right.
Have the countries all gotten together and said, okay, we agree that these are the laws?
Right.
Okay.
So they and
obviously I didn't take any maritime law classes in law school.
Right. So I mean,
we're land bound.
Every country has its idea.
My captain's license is suspended. That's what I tell my buddies all the time when we're on the boat. Sorry, can't drive it.
Every country has its own ideas about what's the right way in which to have due process in situations where things like this occur or loss of cargo occur out in international waters. And they have come together and in certain areas have agreed that certain things apply. And one of the limitations, unfortunately, in this particular case is going to be for the maritime law, I know, is that, it's going to basically mean that any damages are going to be limited to what that person could have provided to dependents.
Yeah,
okay, and it's almost like it's
like a mixture of like workers'
compensation. And so there's going to be
the 19-year-old, if the 19-year-old didn't have a wife or any children, does that mean that he couldn't? So recover. It doesn't mean future dependents. Right. It means the actual dependents that you have.
I'm not sure, but just for the listeners, Chace, before you answer that second part, for workers' comp, let's say you can be a 40, 50-year-old person, but if you don't have children or a spouse,
that's
essentially you're getting $7,500 before a death,
and the medical bills paid for,
right?
Whatever,
right. But that's it. And so is that the same for? I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, it's the same kind of idea. Dependent is somebody that's dependent upon you for for you to sustain their lifestyle. In this particular case, though, the price tag of the actual ticket was $250,000.
Right.
And I think 2 of the people on board, maybe 3.
Were you able to get a mortgage for that type of thing, or did you just have to pay?
No, this is cash in hand.
Money.
Not going on that trip anytime soon.
Yeah, so most of them are multi-millionaires or billionaires. At least 2 of them are billionaires, and they had dependents. And so any sort of lawsuit that is successful is likely, just based on that, going to probably exhaust it. And these claims can be brought both in the U.S. and in England. And actually, these types of liability waivers in England are illegal. So it has zero effect in England. So there may be some, some lawyers that have to make some pretty
I think
good decisions to go one place or the other to bring the lawsuit.
I would imagine that they're going to look past the waiver and go to what's more, I guess, what can be recovered more as far as damages and what's allowed in damages. I think if the United States has a system that allows for more damages to be paid than England, regardless of the waiver, I think they're filing in the United States.
I agree.
Because I don't think that's how little faith I have in this waiver of this case.
Well, and if whoever ends up having this case, needs some assistance and needs an attorney to go check out, the subsidiary interest of this Bahamas
company. I was about to say there was a Bahamas. You need to check that out, Shawn.
I am happy to do whatever I need to do.
Your due diligence for years down there.
Licensed to practice down there, investigate fully, and provide, whatever
you've
necessary
always been
information
selfless. I mean, you're just out to help. Just the simple man, like the billionaires that can go to the bottom of the earth and implode.
We had somebody contact us one time, a slip and fall in the Turks and Caicos airport.
Well, you gotta go
and
check
I
it out.
immediately volunteered. I said, I will go.
Yeah.
I will go investigate.
Tonight.
Please note that only one of us here took maritime admiralty law.
I did not.
And so we can, you just make your decision. Shawn's already admitted he didn't take it.
I don't know whether it was offered at Georgia State. I mean, that's above the fall line. There was never even an ocean in Atlanta.
17 different languages. I'll blend in.
Okay, all dialects.
Yes, 100%
from the South.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, that is sort of the next issue, and that is the jurisdiction. In this particular case, it's going to be really complex because it is an American company. Where do you file? Do you file in the place where the company is located? Do you file in the place where they contracted? So those are all issues that are going to come up. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us today, talking about the liability waiver. We will probably follow up with this as things develop in the future with this Oceangate sort of litigation. I anticipate there will be, be a lot to be said about this particular legal issue. But thank you all very much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Appreciate it, guys.